The room is hushed as Princess Diana stands alone, silk pulled at her feet. The faint rustle of fabric louder than the ticking clock. Her fingers tremble, not from cold, but from a choice no one will ever witness. Down the corridor, a child coughs, weak and fading. Diana closes her eyes, breath catching as one thought cuts straight through her heart. What if love matters more than legacy? She steps forward, unaware this quiet act will save one life, and bury a secret forever. Where are you watching from today? Tell us your city. This story reaches hearts everywhere. The room had been prepared for reverence, not for comfort, never comfort, but for display. A single lamp burned on a side table, its light warm and low, as if even the electricity understood it should not be loud. The walls were pale, the curtains heavy, and the carpet so thick that footsteps vanished into it like secrets. Princess Diana stood near the dress. It lay across a long padded table, ivory silk and careful stitching, the kind of fabric that looked like it had been poured rather than sewn. Pearls caught the lamplight in tiny, quiet flashes, like restrained applause. Beside it, chalk lines traced possibilities on the cloth, where a seam could be lifted, where a sleeve could be shortened, where a hidden panel could be separated without anyone noticing at first glance. She did not touch it immediately. Her hands hovered, fingers slightly curled, as if the air above the gown held heat. The clock on the mantel ticked with a patient insistence. Not dramatic, not cruel, just constant, like a reminder that time never asked permission. Outside, somewhere beyond the palace grounds, the city moved, a faint wash of distant traffic. A dog barking once, then silence. And then so soft she wondered if she imagined it. A cough, thin, ragged. The kind of cough that didn't clear a throat, but stole breath. Diana's eyes lifted toward the half-open door. The corridor beyond was dim. No footsteps, no staff passing, no voices. For once, no schedule pressing itself into her skin. Only that cough again. Far away, carried by winter air through a window left open for freshness. Freshness, as if pain could be aired out. She swallowed, her throat tightening. The dress was not only fabric. It was a story the world told itself about her. About innocence, about fairy tales, about a girl who smiled and made people believe in gentle endings. It had been photographed, praised, sketched, remembered in public as if it belonged to everyone who had ever looked at it. But standing here alone, Diana felt something sharper beneath the beauty. A weight, a cost. She stepped closer, and the hem brushed the edge of the table with a whisper. The silk shifted slightly, like it was breathing. Her reflection stared back at her from a tall mirror near the window. Pale face, soft eyes, lashes lowered. She looked composed from a distance. Up close, there was a tremor in the corners of her mouth she couldn't control. "You're not supposed to be sad," she murmured. So quietly it hardly became sound. The words weren't for the dress. Not really. They were for the version of herself the palace preferred. Polished, smiling, grateful, Diana's fingers finally touched the fabric. Cool, unforgiving in its perfection. She traced the beadwork with her fingertip, feeling the tiny ridges where pearls had been fastened one, by hands that had never met the people who would later weep in hospital beds. Her breath caught, not from nostalgia, but from the sudden violent clarity of what she had seen earlier that day. A child. Not in the papers, not in a posed charity photograph, not in the sanitized distance of a headline. A real child with skin too thin over bone, lashes too long for a face too small, and fingers that trembled when they tried to hold a cup. The way the child had coughed, like the body was apologizing for failing. Diana closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she saw the little bed, the clinical light, the mother's exhausted posture, a hand always hovering as if she could protect her child from air itself. The child's eyes bright with fear and stubbornness, still trying to be brave. Diana's chest tightened until it felt like her ribs were a cage. What was a gown compared to that? What was history compared to breath? The palace loved symbols, loved tradition, loved the illusion of permanence. But illness did not care about tradition. Poverty did not bow to titles. Dying children did not wait for royal approvals. Diana opened her eyes, and the room seemed smaller. The clock ticked again, and the sound was suddenly unbearable. Each tick a soft push toward a decision she had already made in her heart, but had not yet dared to make with her hands. On the table near the dress lay a small velvet box and a set of sewing tools arranged neatly by someone who assumed the alterations were for appearance. Beside them, almost hidden under a folded cloth, was a pair of silver dressmaking scissors. The blades caught the lamplight. Diana stared at them for a long moment. If she did this, she would be crossing an invisible line. Not the kind written on paper, but the kind enforced by looks, whispers, and cold, polite voices that could turn love into scandal with a single sentence. They would say she was reckless. They would say she was emotional. It lay across a long, padded table, ivory silk and careful stitching, the kind of fabric that looked like it had been poured rather than sewn. Pearls caught the lamplight in tiny, quiet flashes, like restrained applause. Beside it, chalk lines traced possibilities on the cloth, where a seam could be lifted, where a sleeve could be shortened, where a hidden panel could be separated without anyone noticing at first glance. She did not touch it immediately. Her hands hovered, fingers slightly curled, as if the air above the gown held heat. The clock on the mantel ticked with a patient insistence. Not dramatic, not cruel, just constant. Like a reminder that time never asked permission. Outside, somewhere beyond the palace grounds, the city moved, a faint wash of distant traffic. A dog barking once, then silence. And then so soft she wondered if she imagined it. A cough. Thin, ragged. The kind of cough that didn't clear a throat, but stole breath. They would say she didn't understand what the dress meant. But Diana did understand. That was the problem. Her hand moved slowly, almost reverently toward the scissors. Her fingers wrapped around the cool metal, and the weight of them settled into her palm like a final answer. She listened. No footsteps, no voices, only the clock and the distant, weak cough that returned like a reminder from another world. Diana's lips parted, and her breath shook. Not because she feared cutting the fabric, because she feared how easy it was to choose love, and how hard it would be to keep it secret. She lifted the scissors above the silk, the blades hovering over the chalked line. And, in that suspended breath, Diana realized she was not cutting a dress. She was cutting an expectation. She was cutting a story the world demanded from her. She was choosing one child's life over 1,000 strangers' admiration. The first blade pressed into the silk, and the room, for a heartbeat, held its silence like a prayer. The scissors begin to close. Then a shadow crosses the doorway, and Diana freezes, caught between mercy and discovery. The world had already decided what the dress meant. Before Diana ever questioned it, the gown had become something larger than fabric, larger even than her. It lived in glossy pages and hushed conversations, in fashion houses and history books that spoke of it with the same reverence reserved for crowns and thrones. Iconic, they called it. Diana had heard the word so many times it no longer sounded real. Standing beside the table, scissors still hovering in her hand, she felt the echo of that worship press in on her from memory alone. She could almost hear the collective gasp from the day she had first stepped into view. The sudden hush before applause, the way strangers' eyes had filled with something like hope, as if silk and pearls could promise them a gentler world. But memory, she was learning, could lie. She lowered the scissors slightly, and let her free hand rest on the edge of the table. Her fingers curled against the padding, grounding herself. They loved the dress because it stayed still. It never spoke back, never disagreed, never disappointed. It didn't wake up afraid. It didn't ache. It didn't feel the weight of eyes searching it for reassurance. "You're beautiful," people had told her that day. She wondered now who they had been talking to. The dress had been praised for its train, its volume, its patience. It had trailed behind her like a promise she wasn't sure she'd made. And in all that admiration, no one had asked what it cost to carry it. Diana looked again at the chalk marks. Practical lines, precise, drawn by professionals who saw only craftsmanship, not consequence. Her jaw tightened. Earlier that evening, someone had spoken fondly of the gown's future, how it would be preserved, protected, admired for generations, as if the highest honor for something beautiful was to be locked away and never used again. Diana felt a quiet rebellion stir in her chest. What if beauty was meant to be spent? She thought of the hospital room again, the cracked linoleum floor, the smell of antiseptic, the way the child's small hand had felt impossibly light when she held it. That hand had trembled, not from fear, but from effort, from trying to stay. No one would ever sketch that moment. No headlines would capture the way the child had smiled. Faint but real when Diana had leaned close and spoken softly, as if kindness could travel through air. That memory mattered more than pearls. Diana set the scissors down for a moment and straightened, smoothing her palms against her skirt. She walked to the mirror again, studying herself with a steadier gaze this time. If they only love the symbol, she whispered, then they don't need to know the truth. The thought did not frighten her. It clarified something. She was not betraying history. She was correcting it. The dress could remain a fairy tale if it wanted. Let the world keep its illusion. Let them remember what comforted them. But she would decide what saved someone. Diana returned to the table, picked up the scissors again, more firmly now, and aligned them with the chalked seam. Her breathing slowed, deliberate. This was not destruction. This was redistribution. She pressed the blades lightly into the silk, just enough to feel the resistance. The fabric did not tear easily. It held as if reminding her of everything it represented. Diana's lips curved into the smallest, saddest smile. "Forgive me," she murmured, not to the dress but to the people who would never understand. As the scissors tightened their grip, a sound drifted in from the corridor. A soft step, closer this time, unmistakably human. Diana's eyes flicked toward the door. Her hands stilled. The footsteps paused just outside. And Diana realizes the world she's defying may be closer than she ever imagined. The hospital room was quiet in a way palaces never were. Not ceremonial, not controlled. This silence was fragile, stitched together by machines, by waiting, by fear. No one spoke aloud. Princess Diana stood just inside the doorway, her presence unannounced, her title irrelevant here. The light was harsh and white, flattening everything it touched. There were no curtains worth closing, no mirrors worth avoiding, only a narrow bed, rails raised, and a child lying far too still beneath thin blankets. The child's chest rose and fell unevenly. Each breath sounded borrowed. Diana took a careful step forward, as if sound itself might cost something. Her shoes made no noise on the linoleum, but she still felt exposed, like kindness had weight, like it could crack the air if handled too roughly. The child turned their head slightly, eyes opened, too large for the face, too aware. For a brief, terrifying second, Diana thought the child might be afraid of her, but instead there was recognition, not of who she was, but of what she carried. Gentleness. "You came back," the child whispered. The voice was thin but steady enough to hurt. Diana's throat tightened. She nodded, lowering herself into the chair beside the bed. She did not reach out at first. She let the moment settle. "I said I would," she replied softly. The child smiled. It was small, crooked, and unbearably brave. Beside the bed, the mother stood frozen, hands clasped together as if she were holding herself in one piece. Her eyes were red, her posture exhausted. She said nothing, only watched, as if afraid that speaking might end the visit. A machine beeped softly. Diana leaned closer, keeping her voice low. "How are you feeling today?" The child shrugged, a tiny movement that stole too much energy. "Tired," they said. Then, after a pause, "But it's better when you're here." That was the moment something inside Diana broke open. Not loudly, not visibly, but completely. She reached for the child's hand this time, wrapping her fingers gently around it. The skin was warm, but the grip was weak, like holding onto something already drifting away. The child coughed. It bent them forward, sharp and rattling. Diana instinctively leaned in, her other hand hovering, unsure where to help without hurting. When the coughing stopped, the child exhaled shakily. "I'm sorry," they whispered. Diana shook her head, eyes shining. "You never have to apologize for breathing." The mother turned away then, pressing her hand to her mouth. Diana stayed. She listened to stories that barely held together, about school friends, about a favorite cartoon, about a dream of seeing the ocean one day. Each word felt like a gift wrapped in time the child did not have. Finally, a doctor entered quietly. His expression was practiced. Careful, heavy. He met Diana's eyes for just a second, and that was enough. Later in the hallway, he spoke in a voice meant to be kind. "We're doing everything we can," he said. Then, after a pause, "But we should prepare." "Prepare." Diana nodded, though the word echoed painfully inside her. As she walked away, she glanced back once more through the doorway. The child was watching her leave, still smiling, still hoping, and in that instant, Diana understood the truth she hadn't wanted to name. Time was not the enemy. Waiting was. As Diana steps into the corridor, the doctor adds quietly, "Without immediate help, days, not months." Diana realizes the dress alone won't be enough. What the child needs costs far more and far faster than she imagined. The corridor felt longer on the way out. Princess Diana walked slowly, not because she had time, but because her body refused to move any faster. The doctor's words followed her like a shadow, days, not months, each step pressing them deeper into her chest. Around her, the hospital carried on. A trolley rolled past. Someone laughed softly near a vending machine. Life, careless and stubborn, continued in all the ways it always did. Diana felt suddenly separate from it. She paused near a window at the end of the corridor. Outside, the sky was pale, washed thin by winter light. Cars moved below, indifferent to the fragile timelines unfolding above them. She pressed her palm to the glass. Behind her eyes, the child's face returned, too calm, too trusting. The way they had smiled as if belief itself could keep them alive. Diana exhaled slowly. "I won't let you wait," she whispered. The promise was not dramatic, no vow spoken aloud to an audience, no flourish, but it settled into her bones with terrifying certainty. She straightened, smoothing the front of her coat, and turned back toward the ward. The mother looked up when she saw her, surprise flickering across her tired face. Diana didn't offer comfort she couldn't guarantee. She didn't make promises she couldn't keep. She simply said, "I'm going to help." The mother's eyes filled instantly. We don't have— "I know," Diana interrupted gently. "You don't have to explain." The woman nodded, unable to speak. Diana left then, her steps firmer than before. Each movement felt guided now, as if hesitation had finally been burned away. The palace loomed different when she returned. Not colder, not crueler, just heavier. As she moved through its corridors, staff bowed, smiled, greeted her with the practiced warmth of routine. None of them knew what she carried inside her chest. None of them suspected that beneath her calm expression, a deadline was ticking louder than any clock. In her private rooms, the dress waited, unchanged, perfect, innocent. Diana stood before it, the memory of the hospital still clinging to her like antiseptic. She reached out, resting her hand on the silk, not reverently this time, but decisively. "This can do more," she said softly. She thought of the money locked inside symbolism, of the resources frozen in admiration, of how easily beauty was preserved while lives slipped away. There were rules here, expectations, watchful eyes. Breaking them would have consequences, but doing nothing would have one too. Diana crossed the room and closed the door herself. The click sounded final. She moved to the desk and pulled open a drawer, scanning its contents with sharp focus. Papers, letters, a discreet contact number she had been given once, years ago, with the quiet implication that it was never to be used lightly. She stared at it. Then she picked up the phone. Her hand did not shake. "Hello," she said when the line connected. "I need discretion, and I need it immediately." A pause. "Yes," she continued. "It's about the dress." She listened, her face carefully neutral. "I understand," she said after a moment. "No records, no names." She ended the call and set the phone down slowly. The promise had been made. Now it had teeth. Diana turned back toward the dress, already measuring time not in days but in hours. As Diana reaches for the scissors again, a knock sounds at the door, soft, polite, and dangerously well-timed. If you were in her place, bound by rules while a life faded, would you risk everything to act? The numbers came quietly. No dramatic declarations. No raised voices. Just figures spoken in careful tones, as if money itself might overhear and take offense. Diana sat at the small table, hands folded neatly in her lap, while the man across from her spoke with professional calm. He did not look at the dress as history. He looked at it as inventory. Portions of the fabric, he said, choosing each word with surgical precision, could be discreetly sold. Panels, train sections, embellishments. Diana nodded once. "And the total?" she asked. A pause. Papers shifted. A number was written down and slid across the table toward her. Diana glanced at it. For a fraction of a second, her breath caught. It was more than she expected, and still not enough. She kept her expression smooth. Royals were trained for this. To react internally and reveal nothing. "That would be immediate?" she asked. "Yes," the man replied. "But discretion has a cost. Speed has a cost. Everything had a cost, it seemed, except waiting. Waiting was free. Waiting was encouraged. Waiting was deadly." Diana thought of the child again, of the doctor's careful face, of the word days. She leaned back slightly. "I need it faster." The man hesitated. "That would require—" "I understand," Diana said gently. "Tell me what it requires." When he spoke again, his voice was lower. The number increased. Diana did not flinch. She had already paid far more than this with silence. "Do it," she said. The man looked at her then, not at her title, not at her posture, but at her eyes. Something shifted in his expression. "Yes, ma'am," he said. The meeting ended without ceremony. No handshakes, no congratulations. Diana remained seated for a moment after he left, staring at the empty chair across from her. Fairy tales, she realized, were expensive. Not because of what they gave, but because of what they took to maintain. She stood and crossed the room, stopping in front of the dress once more. Now, chalk lines had been replaced with small pins, markers of intent. The silk seemed less innocent now, exposed, vulnerable, like truth. She ran her hand along the fabric, feeling where it would be separated, divided, transformed into something invisible but powerful. "Thank you," she murmured, not sentimentally, but sincerely. The palace around her hummed with oblivious normalcy. Somewhere silverware clinked, somewhere laughter drifted, somewhere plans were being made that had nothing to do with survival. Diana checked the time. Too much had already passed. She moved quickly now, summoning the seamstress she trusted without explanation, watching as careful hands prepared the first cut. No questions were asked. That too had a price. As the scissors were positioned, Diana felt a sharp twist of fear, not of being caught, but of being late. The seamstress paused. "Are you sure?" Diana met her gaze. "Money isn't dignity," she said quietly, "but it can protect it." The scissors descended. Outside the room, a phone rang. Once, twice, unanswered. Diana didn't look away. As the first section of silk is lifted away, a message arrives, marked urgent, and Diana's heart drops before she reads it. The sound was quieter than Diana expected. Not a rip, not a tear, just a soft, deliberate snip like breath being released. The seamstress worked with extraordinary care, lifting the scissors only when necessary, cutting exactly where the pins guided her. Each movement was precise, reverent, as if the fabric were alive and deserved respect even as it was being undone. Diana stood close, closer than protocol would ever suggest. She watched every motion, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, nails pressing into her palms. This was not destruction, this was surgery. The silk parted slowly, reluctantly, as though it understood what it was being asked to give up. Sections were folded immediately, wrapped in plain cloth, stripped of spectacle. The dress was becoming anonymous. A phone vibrated again on the table behind her. Diana did not turn. She could not afford distraction. Not now. Time had already been wasted on politeness, on hesitation, on rules designed to preserve appearances rather than lives. The seamstress paused briefly, looking up. "It's done," she said quietly. "This part, at least." Diana nodded. "How much time?" she asked. "Hours," the woman replied. "The rest will follow tonight." Hours. The word landed like a challenge. Diana crossed the room and picked up the wrapped fabric. It was lighter than she expected, almost unbearably so. She handed it over without ceremony. "Take it," she said, directly. The seamstress hesitated only a second, then nodded and left through the side door reserved for things meant not to be seen. Diana stood alone again. The dress, what remained of it, looked altered now. Not ruined, not damaged, changed, like her. She finally turned toward the phone. Missed call, then another, and another. Her chest tightened. She answered the last message instead of the call, reading the short, efficient words that appeared on the screen. Transfer initiated. Complications possible. Complications. Diana exhaled sharply. "Of course," she murmured. Nothing ever moved cleanly through systems built to slow urgency. She paced once, then stopped herself. Panic would not help. She picked up the phone and dialed the hospital directly, forcing her voice to stay calm. "Yes," she said when the nurse answered. "It's me. Any change?" A pause. Diana closed her eyes. "I see," she whispered. "Thank you for telling me." She ended the call slowly, lowering the phone as if it were heavier than it was. The child had worsened. Not drastically, but enough. Enough to steal comfort. Enough to shorten margins. Enough to make hours feel obscene. Diana looked back at the table where the dress had once rested whole and perfect. Chalk marks remained faintly visible on the exposed padding, ghosts of plans already fulfilled. She pressed her hand flat against the surface. "I'm trying," she said softly, to no one and everyone. Outside, the palace clock struck the hour. Time did not pause for courage. Diana straightened, squared her shoulders, and moved for the door. If the money failed her, she would find another way. If the system slowed her, she would push harder. But as she stepped into the corridor, a staff member approached, face pale. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "there's been a question raised." Diana stopped. What kind of question? One about the dress. The words settled between them like a threat. As Diana turns back toward her rooms, she realizes the sacrifice may save a child, but expose her before it's finished. The palace has begun to notice the dress isn't whole, and Diana's secret no longer belongs to her alone. Diana did not walk through the front entrance this time. She used a side corridor, one meant for supplies and quiet exits. Her coat pulled closer around her as if fabric could disguise familiarity. The hospital smelled the same. Clean, sharp, unforgiving, but tonight it felt charged, as though every surface knew something important was happening. She stopped at the nurse's station. No introductions, no titles, just an envelope placed gently on the counter. "For the child in room 12, Diana said. Her voice was steady, practiced calm, masking the way her heart pounded against her ribs. "It's to be applied immediately." The nurse glanced down, then up. "How would you like this recorded?" Diana met her eyes. "It wouldn't." The nurse hesitated. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Understood." The envelope disappeared into a drawer. No stamp, no signature, no proof this moment had ever existed. Diana stepped back. She did not follow. She did not hover. She knew the danger of being seen lingering, of care turning into curiosity. Instead, she stood near the wall, half-shadowed, listening. The hum of machines seeped through thin partitions. Footsteps moved past. A cart rolled. Somewhere, a monitor beeped, steady, hopeful. Minutes passed. Then a sound Diana had not heard before. Laughter, soft, brief, fragile. It slipped through the corridor like a gift no one had wrapped. Diana's breath caught. She edged closer, just enough to see the doorway of room 12 from a distance. The curtain was half drawn. Inside, the mother sat forward in her chair, one hand pressed to her mouth, eyes bright with disbelief. The child was awake, not fully upright, not strong, but awake. A nurse adjusted something on the IV stand, her movements quicker now, more purposeful. Another entered, followed by a doctor. Words were exchanged, quiet, urgent, careful, but the tone had shifted. Diana leaned back against the wall as relief rushed through her so fast it made her dizzy. She closed her eyes. For one suspended moment, nothing else mattered. Not the palace, not the dress, not the questions waiting like wolves. Just this, breath, time bought. She allowed herself a single tear. It fell silently, absorbed into the fabric of her coat. Then she straightened. Hope, she knew, was dangerous. It made people careless. It made them linger. She turned to leave. "Ma'am?" The voice stopped her. Diana froze. She turned slowly to find a young nurse standing a few steps away, studying her face, not rudely but intently, as if memory were aligning itself with recognition. "Yes," Diana asked calmly. The nurse hesitated. "I just wanted to say, whoever you are, thank you." Diana held her gaze, then offered the smallest smile. "Take care of them," she said. The nurse nodded, and then her eyes flicked, just once, to Diana's face again, lingering a beat too long. Diana walked away. Her steps were measured, unhurried, but inside, tension tightened like a drawn wire. Because gratitude was one thing, recognition was another. As Diana exits into the night, she senses it clearly now. The secret is no longer invisible, and someone has started to see her. If you could help someone and never be known, would you still choose to do it? The palace whispered differently at night. Not the harmless murmur of footsteps or routine exchanges, but something sharper, more deliberate. Conversations ended when Diana entered a corridor. Doors closed a second too quickly. Eyes lifted, assessed, and turned away. She felt it immediately. Suspicion had weight. It changed the air. Diana walked with composed grace, her posture unchanged, her pace unhurried. If anyone expected guilt to announce itself, they would be disappointed. Years of observation had taught her one thing clearly. Panic was louder than truth. Near the staircase, two aides stood speaking in low tones. As Diana passed, one of them fell silent. The gown, the other finished, too late. Diana did not react. She did not slow, but the word echoed in her chest. The dress. Always the dress. In her private sitting room, a folder lay open on the table where she had not left one. Its contents were minimal. Inventory notes, preservation schedules, proposed exhibition dates. Proposed. Her fingers brushed the edge of the paper. Someone had noticed. A knock came at the door. Not sharp. Not hesitant. Formal. "Yes?" Diana said. A senior staff member entered, expression carefully neutral. "Ma'am, there's been an inquiry." Diana met his gaze. "About what?" "A discrepancy," he replied. "Regarding the wedding gown." There it was. Diana folded her hands together. "I see." He shifted slightly. "It's nothing official, yet, but questions are being asked." "By whom?" she asked calmly. "A committee," he said. "Preservation, historical oversight, guardians of symbols." Diana nodded once. "And what do they want?" "To confirm the gown remains intact." Intact. The word tasted false. "They'll want to see it," he added gently. Diana considered this. Not with fear, but with calculation. "They won't," she said. The staff member hesitated. "Ma'am, it's being altered," Diana replied. "As planned." "Altered? How?" Diana rose slowly from her chair. The movement controlled, deliberate, in ways already approved. She did not elaborate. Silence stretched. "I'll handle it," she said finally. "You may tell them that." The man bowed and withdrew, though uncertainty lingered behind his eyes. When the door closed, Diana exhaled. This was the moment she had known would come. Not discovery, but pressure. They would not accuse her outright. That would require proof. Instead, they would surround the truth with protocol until it suffocated. Diana crossed to the window. The grounds below were dark, orderly, serene. From a distance, everything looked perfect. She pressed her forehead lightly against the glass. The child's laughter returned to her memory. Brief, fragile, real. She would not trade that sound for silence. A soft chime sounded from her phone. A message. Funds received. Treatment proceeding. Diana closed her eyes. Relief surged through her. But it was short-lived, because at the same moment footsteps sounded again outside her door. More than one set this time. She straightened, slipped the phone into her pocket, and turned just as the knock came. Firmer now, less polite. "Ma'am," a voice called, official and unfamiliar. "We need to speak with you." Diana placed her hand on the back of the chair. She did not run. She did not hide. She lifted her chin and walked to the door. As Diana opens the door, she realizes this confrontation could expose everything, or force her to choose who the truth belongs to. Diana learns the inquiry isn't about preservation at all. The dress is leverage, and someone wants control over where the money truly went. The hospital looked different at night. Not quieter, just heavier. Lights were dimmed, voices lowered, movements deliberate. Even hope seemed to tread carefully here, as if afraid of waking something it couldn't put back to sleep. Princess Diana stood just beyond the doorway this time. She did not enter. She had learned the danger of believing presence alone could protect. Inside, the child lay still again. The earlier color had faded from their cheeks. The small chest rose and fell with effort, each breath a negotiation. A machine traced thin green lines across a screen, steady but strained. Diana felt the return of fear like cold water down her spine. A doctor approached her in the corridor, expression composed but tight around the eyes. He spoke softly, the way people do when words themselves feel dangerous. "The treatment is working," he said. Then he paused, "but the body is very tired." Diana nodded. She had no illusions left about guarantees. "Will they wake?" she asked. "Yes," he replied. "For a while. For a while." The phrase settled heavily between them. Diana stepped closer to the door, stopping just short of crossing the threshold. The mother sat beside the bed, shoulders slumped now, hope having burned through her strength too quickly. When she looked up and saw Diana, relief flickered, then fear, as if she were afraid to ask for more. Diana shook her head gently. "Not no, just not yet." Inside the room, the child stirred. Eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then finding the doorway, finding her. Their lips curved, faint but determined. Diana pressed her hand to the doorframe to steady herself. The smile was a gift and a warning. She had bought time, yes, but time was fragile. It could slip through fingers as easily as silk. The doctor spoke again, quieter now. "We'll know more by morning." Morning. Another measure, another cliff. Diana stepped back, giving the mother space, giving the moment dignity. She turned away before tears could claim her composure. In the corridor, she leaned briefly against the wall, eyes closed, breath measured. She had done everything right, everything possible, and still this. For the first time since the scissors had touched silk, doubt crept in. Not doubt in her choice. Doubt in the universe's willingness to meet her halfway. She opened her eyes as a nurse passed, nodding respectfully. Diana returned the gesture, though it cost her effort now. Kindness was not a shield. It was a risk. She checked her phone, no new messages, no updates, no reassurance disguised as data. Just silence. Diana lifted her gaze to the ceiling, as if answers might be written there. "Please," she whispered. "Not to God, not to fate, to time itself." She straightened and walked away, knowing she could not stay without unraveling. Some vigils had to be endured from a distance. Behind her, in room 12, the child's breathing faltered, just enough to draw a nurse's attention, just enough to make the night hold its breath. As dawn approaches, a sudden change on the monitor pulls the staff forward, and Diana feels instinctively that everything is about to break. When you've given everything you can, how do you survive the waiting without losing yourself to fear? Dawn arrived without mercy. A pale, fragile light slipped through the hospital windows, touching everything gently, as if trying not to disturb what had already been broken. The night staff moved more slowly now. Voices were lower, footsteps careful. Princess Diana stood at the end of the corridor when it happened. She did not hear alarms. She did not hear shouting. What she heard was absence. The steady rhythm that had marked time all night simply stopped. A nurse stepped into room 12 and did not come back out. Another followed. Then the doctor. Diana knew before anyone spoke. Her body recognized the truth faster than her mind would allow it. She walked forward anyway. The room was quiet in a way that felt permanent. The machines were still there, screens dim, lines flat and unmoving. The child lay as they had all night, small, peaceful, finally unburdened by effort. The mother stood at the bedside, one hand resting on the blanket, the other covering her mouth. No sound came from her now. Grief had gone too deep for noise. Diana stopped just inside the doorway. She did not intrude. She bowed her head slightly, a gesture of respect so small it might have gone unnoticed, but it mattered to her. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. The mother turned then, eyes red but dry as if tears had been spent hours ago. She looked at Diana for a long moment, studying her face not with blame but with something closer to gratitude. "You gave us more time," the woman whispered. That mattered. Diana's chest tightened. Time. The word no longer felt like currency. It felt like a gift that had been opened and cherished, then gently set down. She stepped closer and rested her hand over the mother's, warm against cold fabric. No titles passed between them. No distance. Just two women standing at the edge of love's limits. Diana stayed only a moment longer. Long enough to say goodbye without words. Long enough to let the silence teach her what applause never had. Outside the room, she leaned briefly against the wall, her composure finally cracking. Her eyes closed. Her breath shuddered once. She did not cry loudly. She cried the way secrets cry. Contained, invisible, heavy. The palace would never know this loss. The world would never pause for it. There would be no headline, no photograph, no proof that kindness had been attempted. Only absence. Diana straightened slowly. She adjusted her coat. She walked away. And with every step she carried a grief no one would ever thank her for. And a certainty she would never regret. Because love, she understood now, did not need to win. It only needed to be given. As Diana reaches the exit, a nurse quietly presses something into her hand. Something the child left behind, meant only for her. The paper was warm from the nurse's hand. That was the first thing Diana noticed. Not the size, not the careful fold. The warmth, like it had been held for courage before being given away. "For you," the nurse said quietly. "The child asked me to wait." Diana nodded, unable to speak, and stepped into a quiet alcove near the exit. Morning light slipped through high windows, pale and tentative, as if unsure whether it was welcome. She unfolded the paper slowly. The handwriting was uneven. Letters leaned, crowded, then drifted apart. Some words were pressed hard into the page. Others were barely there at all. It took effort to read. "Thank you for coming back." Diana closed her eyes. She opened them again and continued. "I wasn't scared when you were there. Mum says brave people help other people feel safe. I think that's you." Her breath hitched. She steadied the paper with both hands. "I know the medicine costs lots. I'm sorry. I tried to get better faster." Diana pressed her lips together, the ache in her chest blooming into something sharp and unbearable. "If I don't wake up again, please don't be sad. I liked the extra days. I liked laughing. That was because of you." The words blurred. Diana lowered the letter, blinking hard until the world steadied. In the margin, drawn carefully in pencil, was a small picture, a crooked flower, petals uneven, stem bent. Beneath it, a final line. "You can keep this secret." "I will." Diana's knees weakened. She leaned against the wall, one hand braced, the other clutching the paper like it was the only solid thing left. This was the answer. Not survival, not a miracle. Meaning. The child had understood more than anyone had given them credit for. They had known about the money, about the secrecy, about the choice, and they had approved it. Diana folded the letter carefully and slipped it into the inside pocket of her coat, over her heart. It belonged nowhere else. Not in archives, not in stories, in her. She stood there a moment longer, letting the silence speak, letting grief soften into something quieter, something that did not demand explanation. When she finally moved, it was with a steadiness that surprised her. Somewhere behind her, the hospital resumed its rhythm. New patients, new urgencies, life continuing, relentless and fragile. Diana stepped outside. The air was cold, clean, honest. She inhaled deeply. She had not failed. She had loved, and that, she knew now, was enough. As Diana walks into the waiting car, she realizes this letter will change how she carries every secret from this moment on. Diana understands the truth at last. The child didn't need saving to make the sacrifice matter. Love had already completed the story. The lights were too bright. They always were. Princess Diana stepped into the room with practiced grace, her posture steady, her expression calm. Applause rose instantly, filling the space the way it always did. Warm, admiring, unquestioning. From the outside, nothing was wrong. She wore a new dress tonight. Simple, elegant, unremarkable by design. It moved easily with her, free of weight, free of expectation. And yet, absence walked beside her like a shadow. As she greeted guests, shook hands, smiled when spoken to. Diana felt the letter's presence against her chest. Thin paper, folded carefully, heavier than any jewel. Each polite exchange passed over it, unaware. People spoke to her about causes, about schedules, about the weather. They praised her warmth, her compassion, her consistency. No one mentioned the child. No one could. Diana listened, responded, nodded at the right moments. Years of training guided her movements, but something deeper guided her still now. A quiet certainty that this performance was no longer the center of her life. Across the room, a photographer lifted his camera. The shutter clicked. Diana did not flinch. She had learned that grief did not always show itself as tears. Sometimes it showed itself as stillness. Later, as she moved toward her seat, she caught her reflection in a mirrored column. For a moment, she barely recognized herself. Not because she looked different, but because she felt altered, stronger, softer, more honest. The child's crooked flower flickered in her mind. The uneven petals, the careful effort. She sat, hands folded in her lap, breathing evenly as a speaker began to talk about hope, about progress, about the future. Diana listened differently now. Hope was not loud. It did not announce itself on stages. It happened in hospital rooms, in whispered promises, in sacrifices no one applauded. A murmur rippled through the audience near the back. Diana felt it before she heard it. Attention shifting, curiosity sharpening. A voice leaned close from the row behind her. "Is it true?" someone whispered, not quite softly enough. "That the wedding dress is missing?" Diana's jaw tightened slightly. She did not turn. She did not respond. She let the words pass through the room like air, touching nothing that mattered. When the applause rose again, she stood with everyone else. The sound washed over her, impersonal and vast. She smiled, but the smile was no longer for them. It was for a child who had trusted her with a secret, and kept it. As the question spreads quietly through the crowd, Diana knows curiosity is growing, and silence will soon be tested. Have you ever carried a loss so quietly that the world never noticed, but it changed you forever? The anteroom smelled faintly of polish and flowers. Princess Diana stood beneath soft lights, hands folded loosely, posture relaxed enough to invite ease, controlled enough to command it. A line of journalists waited, notebooks open, microphones angled upward like quiet requests. The questions began gently, about the event, about the cause, about the speech. Diana answered with warmth, precision, kindness. She smiled when appropriate, nodded when listening, paused when reflection was expected. The rhythm was familiar, comfortable. Then it shifted. A reporter cleared his throat. "Your Royal Highness," he said, voice respectful but intent. "There have been reports concerning your wedding gown." The room seemed to lean forward. Diana felt the air change, not dramatically, but distinctly. Curiosity had found its shape. She met the reporter's eyes. "Yes," she said. "Is it true," he continued carefully, "that the dress is no longer intact?" A second microphone edged closer. Another voice followed. "Was it altered? And if so, why?" Diana breathed in. She thought of silk under scissors, of an envelope on a counter, of a child's uneven handwriting. She smiled. "The dress," she said calmly, "is where it should be." The answer was gentle, vague, perfectly polite. It satisfied no one. A murmur rippled through the room. "But ma'am, people are saying, will we see it again?" Diana's smile softened. "Some things," she said quietly, "are not meant to be revisited." Silence followed, not confused but surprised. She thanked them, nodded once more, and stepped away before anyone could shape another question sharp enough to cut. Behind the closed door, the noise faded. Diana paused in the corridor, alone again. The palace walls rose around her, pale and enduring, holding centuries of secrets. She slipped her hand inside her coat, fingers brushing the folded letter. Still there, still hers. She had not lied, she had protected.